Hello, my name is Hannah Bonner, and I'm coming to you from Utah, home of beautiful Zion National Park, where I've been working this past summer as a scientist and parks fellow. And to give you some context about what I'm doing this summer, we're actually going to hop back about a year in time to July 2020, when this little boy, his mom, and their dog were playing in Zion's Virgin River. They were having a great time until suddenly the dog began acting really strange. And about 15 minutes after these symptoms began, the dog had convulsions, couldn't breathe anymore, and actually ended up dying. Understandably, both the little boy and his mom were devastated, and they rushed their dog to a local veterinarian trying to understand what had happened. The vet, after hearing about the symptoms and the experience, diagnosed the cause of death as a neurotoxin. And specifically, the neurotoxin that came to mind is Anatoxin A, also known by the name rapid death factor. This neurotoxin causes the symptoms the dog experienced and is naturally produced by cyanobacteria that can grow in water. However, this was news to the park when the dog's owner contacted them because there had been no previous indication of anatoxin or toxigenic cyanobacteria in Zion's rivers. In fact, when you think about toxigenic cyanobacteria, you don't really think about rivers at all. This is a photo of Utah Lake taken a few years ago, and it's in lakes that we think about these toxigenic cyanobacteria. In fact, you might have heard of a harmful algal bloom or a HAP event, which do occur frequently in lakes. As far as rivers go, there's actually only one known instance in the entire United States of these toxigenic cyanobacteria being in a river system, or at least there was only one known instance. In response to the dog's death, Zion Park scientists started looking at water bodies throughout the park. And the main water body in the park is the Virgin River, which has a few notable tributaries: the East Fork, the North Fork, North Creek, and Laverton Creek. When park scientists visited these tributaries, they found something very startling. Toxigenic cyanobacteria species and toxins, including anatoxin A, were found in all four water bodies. Zion was the second locality in the United States to have toxigenic species in a river. This, as you can imagine, is a big issue for park management. Zion is really popular. The park is expecting about 5 million visitors this year, and many of those visitors come to recreate in the park's water. This is a photo of the Narrows, one of the most popular hikes in the park, and the trail for this hike is literally up the river. And as you can imagine, this is a challenge when that river may contain lethal toxins. Consequently, that's where I come in. I was brought in this year as a scientist and parks fellow with a few different goals. The first goal was to create an identification guide for Zion benthic cyanobacteria. As I said, Zion is only the second place in the United States to find these in the rivers, and there still is a lot of uncertainty about what these cyanobacteria even look like. My second objective was to expand park monitoring efforts to inform issued recreational advisories, to educate the public and local companies. And then my third goal was to improve communication to the public. So, to begin with, creating an identification guide for benthic cyanobacteria. This entailed me spending a lot of time surveying rivers and looking really carefully at underwater rocks for anything that could be cyanobacteria. Here's one species that I frequently encountered, Microcoleus autumnalis. And as you can see, when I keep saying benthic cyanobacteria, what I'm referring to is the underwater growth form the cyanobacteria takes. Frequently, these cyanobacteria form algal mats, is what we call them. So basically, a covering of cyanobacteria on the riverbed. Microcoleus is distinguished by its really vibrant green color, but the cyanobacteria can range from a tan or caramel to a dark brown to a green, with a lot of different growth forms. Here's what one of these mats for Microcoleus at least looks like up close. You can see one really distinguishing thing about it is that really mucousy, gushy texture. I did this throughout the summer to create an identification guide and use spectral analysis to identify specifically species or genuses. And what I found is there's at least 5 toxigenic cyanobacteria species in the park, and 3 new growth forms were identified as a result of my efforts. This is really helpful as we go forward as a park trying to sample these and monitor population growth and changes and manifestations. Understanding what they look like is really critical to those efforts. That actually takes us to the second objective I had this summer, which was to expand the park's monitoring efforts. As I mentioned, the park issues recreational risk advisories, which basically give recommendation to recreators of what behaviors are reasonably safe and what aren't. There's 3 potential recreational risk advisory levels: health watch, warning, and danger. And each of those advisories corresponds to different toxin concentrations from the cyanobacteria and potential human health risk. In order to inform these advisories, I carried out 3 different types of sampling this summer. The first was actually through visual surveys, which is when I would go to an established site and look around and look and see how much toxigenic cyanobacteria I was seeing and monitor how it was growing and proliferating throughout the season. This was then accompanied by benthic disturbance sampling. And with benthic disturbance sampling, once I found a mat or an area of growth of cyanobacteria, I would actually step all over it and really agitate it. These mats, once they're dislodged, will float in the water column and also release the most toxins. So I would disturb an area, get the mat flowing, and then scoop up a portion of that disturbed water, which then would be analyzed for toxin content. The third sampling method I employed was spat bag deployment. Spat bags are these bags that are permeable by the water, full of resin beads. And so these would be placed in a waterway for a period of 8 to 10 days. And any toxins that are being carried from upstream that pass through the spat bag, the toxin will actually adhere to the resin beads, allowing you to get a measurement and indication of toxin production upstream. And so this was nice because it caught a really comprehensive picture of what was going on with the cyanobacteria throughout the season. All 3 of these sampling measurements would then be combined to issue a recreational advisory. If there was a lot of toxins, we'd issue a danger advisory, recommending people avoid all and any contact with the water, versus if there's very few toxins, we do a health watch and advise visitors to just avoid submersion or swimming in the water. One additional thing I did in terms of these advisories was doing some probability analysis to calculate how many samples, benthic disturbance samples especially, we needed to take in order to be able to accurately identify danger advisory conditions. And I found that you needed at least 7 samples to have a 65% probability of correctly identifying that. And that led to some big changes in sampling measures. Prior to my arrival, there were only 5 sampling sites and about 5 samples a month being taken. But after this probability analysis and with my work, we expanded to 7 sampling sites and 19 samples a month to really be able to have much more assurance in issuing the correct advisory. Additionally, I developed a new sampling sheet, a sampling protocol. I really fleshed out the way we recorded visual observations, and I reorganized and created a comprehensive database to control not only my sampling, but also to contain past year sampling and future year sampling for easier analysis and viewing. Finally, my third objective was to share some of this knowledge with the community through community outreach. And this was done in a few different ways. The first is in how we communicated these recreational advisories. This was the signage that was previously being used to my arrival. And every month, an appropriate signage was placed around any access to water bodies. But as you can see, this sign is a little overwhelming. There's a lot of text, and it's not really intuitive what harmful cyanobacteria are, what they look like. I worked with the visualization team to redesign signs to look like this, to use more clear and intuitive language, to include pictures, and to be a little less text heavy. In addition, I created an infographic that is designed to simply, quickly, and approachably educate even a layperson about what these mats look like, how to identify them, and what the different advisories mean, and the consequences of exposure at different toxin levels. So here's an example, a little zoom in on that of what that infographic looks like. And this helps visitors and park staff just understand more what this looks like and dispel some common misconceptions. In combination, these made up the goals of my fellowship this summer. So first of all, figuring out what these benthic cyanobacteria look like so that we can sample them and we can monitor them, and creating an identification guide so this knowledge can be widely shared. That second goal, to expand monitoring, to inform recreational advisories, and also make sure that the correct advisory is being given. And then to improve communication to the public so that they can understand what's happening in the park. In combination, these three goals resulted in improved understanding of benthic cyanobacteria in Zion, which is really important. This is such a novel and an evolving issue, and there's still so many questions about the life cycle of these cyanobacteria, about their toxin production, about how long they've been prolific in the park, and about if they're in other places. And that makes it a challenging area of science to address, but also a really exciting area of research. And I am so grateful that I had the opportunity to be involved in it and to be able to contribute to it this summer. Thanks so much for listening. Any questions?